that summit. Well, to talk about where things currently stand and more importantly what the road ahead looks like, I have with me a power-packed panel here, leaders who know India, but more importantly who know where the money is heading into and how much of their own money they intend to put to work here in India. Joining me, a star panel here, starting with John Chambers. John, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Chairman of the USISPF. Mukesh, Aghi, the CEO of the USISPF. Mukesh, many thanks for joining us here today. Amarjyoti, Barua, the CFO of the Mahindra Group. Amar, thanks so much for being here. Bipul, Sinha, CEO of Rubrik. It's great to have you join us on the panel. Bipul, thanks very much. Satsangi, the Senior Vice President and MD India at HP. Great to have you here. Vaishali Sinha, the co-founder of Renew. Vaishali, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on the program. Deogun, a familiar face here on CNBC. It's good to have you here and your new avatar at Brunswick. Thanks very much for being here. And Sachit Ahuja, the president of Tillman Global. Sachit, great to have you join us on the program. John, let's get right into it. This is your 50th visit to India. How different is it today?
It's moving with a tremendous speed and direction. Each time, Shereen, we make very optimistic comments that people say there's no way it's going to happen, and yet we overachieve it. When we had the vision 8 years ago to bring this together and say it would be the most strategic partnership in the world, people are now seeing that happen. And in just 1 year, it's changing what used to be 3 to 5 years. From a startup perspective, which is your passion, in the 127,000 startups in India, you begin to look at the number of unicorns created. It's the most fast-growing area in the world. Your IPO market is now 17% of the world's IPOs. And why that's important to the average person in India is you add your head count after you become a unicorn and after an IPO. So you will begin to see the investments, which went up 15-fold from 2015 to 2022, starting to repay dividends. But what you see in this panel is groups working together with tremendous speed. And Mukesh, I think I'd be underestimating to say how cooperative and how much of a win-win both the government in India's been at all levels, but also in the U.S.
Well, and I will get to startups and talk to Bipul about that in just a second. You're absolutely right. There has been a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of investment, and a lot of IPOs in 2024 with a lot of the new age startup companies being listed in the Indian markets. But Mukesh, just to pick up on where John left off, and you are going to have to use the microphone as well, in light of the aspiration of building out FDI from the US into India across different sectors, and of course supply chain has been the big area of focus, defense the other big area of focus, the announcement coming in on the first joint fab that will be set up here in India. What are the tangible steps that you believe have been taken between the last leadership summit and this one that will further amplify momentum?
So what we're seeing, Shereen, is a process where now companies are making decisions, where they're basically digging the grounds, opening plans, setting up global capability centers, making sure that India becomes part of the global supply chain. You have to understand there are multiple factors playing here. One is the stress point with US and China, where companies are saying, hey, I need to de-risk my supply chain. India becomes critical. India has made a tremendous effort to ensure that a lot of companies come in here. Yes, we're seeing them going to Vietnam, Cambodia, but India also provides a market. It's a $4 trillion economy, going to become a $5 trillion economy. So what we are saying is market opportunity, manufacturing. The final factor I like to add is there's a shortage of skilled workers in the US. What we saw in Ukraine war was that countries which have industrial base are going to be effective in the long-term war anytime. And US has that limitation at the moment, and India becomes pivotal to be their industrial base, and that's why the chip plant partnership happening in other areas also. So I think India is going to play a pivotal role, both for market opportunity and de-risking supply chain.
Yeah, John, if I could just get you to pick up on that and elaborate on that a little bit further, because, Mukesh also talked about Vietnam and Indonesia and Thailand and so on and so forth, which have also set themselves up as alternative destinations to try and drive in the component ecosystem from China and so on and so forth. But from a manufacturing standpoint, why do you believe, or do you believe that this is going to be the moment where we finally start to see that manufacturing breakout take place in India?
I think when you look at the creativity that's going on in India and how close the government is India, working with other governments around the world, but especially the U.S., there's a huge importance of a secure supply chain. And at Cisco, my prior company, we started that partnership 8 years ago. And now you begin to see the supply chain committing to billions of dollars of manufacturing here.
With a recent facility coming up in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah. Yes, but you're seeing that across the board. The timing is right. You've got to catch market inflection points. You're seeing now with the semiconductor industry, also supply chain, so important to the future of a country, but you're also seeing the support start to occur. So you see the big semiconductor companies coming in terms of what's really possible, and you watch what an Apple does in terms of investment, a GE in terms of investment. So the timing's right, and I'm pretty good at inflection points. I have a lot of weaknesses. The timing is right on manufacturing. Is probably the most important element for job creation in India. So I think doing that across all of the 28 states becomes very important, but it's the right time with the right leadership to occur.
It's the right time and the right leadership, as John said. Amar, let me take that point forward as far as manufacturing specifically is concerned. And across the board, I mean, the Mahindra Group has its footprint across different sectors at this point in time. Do you believe that this is the big breakout moment on manufacturing?
Absolutely do. And one of the points that I think is in India's advantage is also the domestic market has become so robust. And I think whenever you're thinking about one country versus another, and you think about setting up a large supply chain, you also want a very robust domestic industry, because then you have an ability to flex up or down. And we are seeing that across our supply chain. You look at the auto business and the scale up we have done to meet the domestic industry, and then the transition we are making to EVs now, which are going to be for the world.
Yeah.
And suddenly you have this flexibility where the domestic industry takes care of any fluctuations in global demand. So I think that's huge. Also, the investment India has been making into engineering capability over the years, I think that places us really well in the context of what everybody is looking for, because it's not just enough to have parts of the supply chain.
Yeah.
You need to have full ownership of the supply chain. I think starts with engineering and R&D, and John and I have spoken about this a lot. One of the areas that I think India needs to continue to focus on to make this manufacturing, this inflection point a reality is really focus on that R&D piece, because I think that's where we are a bit weak.
So give me an example of what the Mahindras are likely to do, or the Mahindra Group is likely to do on that front. How do you prioritize R&D given the inflection point that you hope to make good on?
Everything we are doing today on the manufacturing side is keeping the globe in mind. So unlike in the past where you would only make something for India, with all the standards and everything that have come into place now, we try to make everything scalable for the world. So if you look at the electric vehicles that we are going to come out with, they are based on a platform called InGlo, which is India Global, right? That intentionally was always the plan. And what we are doing with Tech Mahindra now is leveraging their capability in AI, data, etc., to also help the industrial part of the group. So a lot of work on R&D for sure, and all with keeping the globe in mind.
Okay, so India for the world, India for India, and India for the world. That is, the build-up that you see happening. Vaishali, yes, you wanted to jump in, yes.
R&D, some great points made by you, but I think between India and US, there's a huge opportunity for us to cross-work together on R&D. So there's a local expertise which we can work on in India and collaborate to find solutions from the US. So I think that sort of partnership is.
Across different
yeah, we are
sectors,
working
right?
with a bunch of institutes and in the US and in Europe, and it's very powerful. But it's important for us to have the domestic focus, because how you use batteries here and how they get used in the US requires different level of R&D. So I think I just wanted to bring that in, so that I think
that's an important point that you brought up.
Yeah, and I think across what we are seeing, I think we've reached a stage where all the countries are quite clear. If I could come in a little bit on renewables, and we are very committed to what we need to do. We have ambitious goals around all the countries independently, but I think time has come for us to cross-collaborate and leverage what we can do well in our countries and how we can marry it with what needs to be done. In India, for example, if you look at Article 6 and carbon sequestration, I think US is advanced technology. India has the need to apply in steel, cement, etc. How do we come up with trade policies to facilitate that, to scale that, to be able to deal with, I think, the China +1, which everybody knows that we need to work towards because of various supply chain issues. How do we make that happen? How does India and US work together on the trade side to make sure that we are able to do more together?
No, the trade point is a very important point that you brought up, and also co-collaborating on areas like renewables and the energy transition. And, you know, both sides have now brought on funds that are going to work towards that. The DFC is investing in the renewable space in India. So there is a lot happening. And I'll come back to you on the transition roadmap in just a second. But so let's talk about manufacturing and the opportunities that throws up and how HP is looking at it.
So let me add on both manufacturing as well as talent and R&D and innovation. And you know, India has been the second largest employee base for HPE, and we have got 15,000 employees, and most of them are R&D and engineering and high tech. And with the new advancement happening in the AI, quantum, and all of those things, HP is really focused. And when our global CEO came a couple of years back, he made the commitment that we are going to be investing $500 million over a period of time in manufacturing, R&D, innovation. And we are really proud that we started manufacturing our high volume, high value server from 1st of March this year. And probably HP is the only US company who decided to go with a local manufacturer here. So VVDN we have chosen as a partner. We started manufacturing because, as John mentioned, India, we see a huge, vast potential in terms of the consumption of these product kind of things. And with the government AI mission, government the strategy on the entire e-commerce, adoption of the various initiative in the telco side and e-commerce side is really helping for the consumption to go very, very high. And we started producing, and suddenly it has been really great success. And especially now coming from the semiconductor industry and some of other industry are going to taking over, probably it's going to be the best place in India, not only for the consumption in India, but how we can support the global manufacturing also and can be self.
Looks like, but Bipul, let me come to you and pick up where John left off on startups and how we've actually seen that ecosystem evolve over the last 2 decades, but more importantly, Rubrik's journey as well, and the focus on cyber resilience and cyber security, which is a priority area that both sides have agreed to work together on.
It's an exciting time for India. If you just look at the digital transformation of India, the digital focus in India, it's really opening up opportunities for companies to find local customers, find product market fit before they take the products to America or Europe and other countries. And that was not available before. So it's India's time has come as far as the startups are concerned. And what we are focused on, particularly in the Indian market, is that how do we secure that digital India? How do we secure the digital transformation of India so that businesses can transform themselves, create more productivity, deliver more services such as healthcare services to far remote areas with confidence that people have digital trust and ability to keep their services up and running and drive services like healthcare, education, because at the scale of India, digital is the answer. And digital trust is the enablement of that digital service.
Well, absolutely. In fact, that is being called the big advantage. What we've been able to do on the digital public infrastructure is being held out as India's big advantage. But, you know, I just want to understand from you, because there's been nervousness and trepidation on tech spends, Bipul, globally. And, of course, it hasn't impacted you because you've had a really good last quarter. But what's the sense that you get currently on spending and specific spending on cybersecurity and cyber resilience?
People are spending money. They are not retracting, but they are reprioritizing in the age of AI. So they are focused on AI-led productivity and how to secure AI. So that's why cybersecurity remains the #1 focus. And within cybersecurity, resilience has really risen to the top because everyone understands they can't stop attacks. So how do you keep the services up and running? So it's AI and then cybersecurity, and there is no real retraction in terms of investment, in terms of new projects. because ultimately everyone realizes that if they are not winning the AI war, ultimately they will not survive in the business, because AI is not about distribution, it is about productivity, and ultimately productivity is what matters.
Well, winning in an AI era, John, I know you wanted to jump in on what Bipul's saying, but also, the opportunity and the challenge it throws up for both India as well as the US.
Yes, I'm going to hit 3 points that we just covered. The first one is, if you're a startup and you're not AI enabled, not just check the box AI, you're going to have trouble getting funded. And so what's happening in the expenditures, the CEOs around the world now have finally said, I realize AI is going to be my future, whether I'm in manufacturing, healthcare, government. And so they're sweeping all the discretionary funds over to AI. Cybersecurity should be growing at 30 or 40% a year. It's only growing at 14, and that might be a generous number, yet the exposures are there. Now, the opportunity between the U.S. and India isn't just to loosely work together. Most of the startups in the U.S., I've got 22 of them, have their second major headquarters here in India. And my startups here in India have their second major headquarters in the U.S. If we can learn to work together uniquely with the enterprise, with the capabilities that both countries bring, we can lead, as Prime Minister Modi said, in AI, America and India together, but in the approach. But the warning is, you're not going to get funded very well if you don't have a large AI part of your architecture. Your evaluation with the same sales, the same profitability is probably half. So it's going to be an AI-enabled world. This has the chance to be India's decade of. But India must lead in AI, and I'd propose our country should think more out of the box on how to do this, including a sovereign wealth fund for AI coming out of India and the U.S. working together.
So a sovereign wealth fund that focuses on AI?
AI only, yes.
Bipul, you wanted to jump in on that?
I think that India has a natural advantage when it comes to AI, because AI is about two things, models and data. And with 1.4 billion population in India, with the right data framework in terms of collection and usage, India can usher into a new generation in AI. So if, in my mind, America and India is American model and Indian data and population. And that's the combination that is so potent in some ways to really lead to this new era of abundance, whether it's in energy, whether it's in productivity, whether it's in productions. So really an amazing time for India.
Well, an amazing time, and a winning combination, as you point out, and both sides have said that they intend to partner and collaborate and co-create and co-curate on the AI front as well. Sajid, let me come to you. Plenty of conversations on digital infrastructure, plenty of conversations around energy security, energy resilience, and the move towards clean energy. How are you looking at India, and what does it mean from an investment standpoint for you today?
So we're a permanent capital investor, so I think our view of India has always been about when, not if. And I think the idea.
So has the time come?
I think our view is that the time has come, and we've evaluated investments in India going back almost 15 years, and I think our view now is there's two focuses where you can provide sort of the underpinnings for the digital transformation, and that's really in the kind of brick and mortar infrastructure. So that's in the data centers that provide the compute and storage capabilities. That's in the fiber networks that connect the data centers, that connect home broadband. India is largely an unpenetrated home broadband network. And partly that's due to the fact that there's been a sort of a jump to mobile first. But at the end of the day, mobile needs kind of a backbone in a fixed network. And so our view is the brick and mortar type of infrastructure is what's required, and will require hundreds of billions of dollars, not just in.
So how much of the hundreds of billions of dollars that is required are you willing to put in?
I think we view India as our second most important kind of market after the U.S., and it's largely not because we have a desire or a sort of a need to invest in emerging markets, but we have a desire to chase growth. And I think India provides sort of unfettered kind of dollar return growth.
Well, that's always good to hear from a CEO's perspective when they're looking at investors talking about chasing growth. But Nick, the India story, I think there is unanimity on the panel that this is our time, and it is our time to sort of boldly move ahead in an AI era. How do you look at the story?
Thanks, Shereen. I think one of the things for those of us who grew up in India, like Bipul and myself, and left, more than 30 years ago, when you come back over time, you start to see things which may not be as noticeable when you're even living here. And I would say we've seen more change in the last 5 years than we saw probably in the last 20, and a credit to what John and Mukesh have built, because it's more than a business partnership. It truly is a strategic partnership, which takes into account things like national security and a number of other areas. At the Brunswick Group, what we do is advise a number of companies on a range of critical issues, and there's no more critical issue when it comes to both the digital infrastructure and the physical infrastructure. To Sachin's point, it's the combination of both, which you rarely see happen in one place. So whether that's in energy, whether that's in financial services, whether that's in a supply chain, whether it's hitting everything all at once. And those companies that are well positioned to capitalize on the changes in both are really going to leap ahead, if you will. And I think in what you've seen and what I see certainly every time I come back here is I notice changes which I never would have seen earlier. We had a great statistic this morning about women in bank accounts and how many women now have bank accounts. We saw great, you hear little tidbits which you now notice and you see anecdotally and you see in the data, which realizes as much potential that's being realized. There's still so much more opportunity, especially if the two countries can partner together at a strategic level.
Well, you know, speaking of strategic partnerships, and Mukesh, one of the big pillars that has been prioritized is defense. And we've, of course, just concluded the SOSA. There is, you know, procurement, General Atomics being one of them, and many joint ventures between both sides and within the private sector as well as governments speaking with each other on this issue. How important is that going to be, especially as we face a world which is in geopolitical transition and flux today?
I think India is going to play a very critical role on defense manufacturing. And the reason I say that, as when you look at what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Middle East, and what we see the potential or set point between US and China, India and China itself. And in all of this requirement, you have to have a large manufacturing industrial base. In the US, we have challenges, not only just on people, but also skills. That's where India can come in and provide that base. And I think when you look at the large bilateral between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, one of the key factors was focus on manufacturing in India.
Yes.
The military chip plant. You look at Stinger missiles being manufactured in India, Javelin being manufactured in India. You look at Lockheed Tata partnership. Yes. You look at other partnership taking place. The General Atomic drones, 30% are going to be manufactured in India itself. So I think India will keep on playing a very pivotal role, will become an industrial manufacturing base. You know, I go back 20 years ago when India got into the drug manufacturing.
Yes.
Today, 39% of the prescription in the US come from India. Yes. And they provide billions of dollars of saving to the US government. I see moving forward 20 years from now, in the defense arena, India will replicate the drug model and provide inexpensive manufacturing supply chain to the US Defense Department itself.
Well, that's an important, you know, aspiration as well as an important objective that you speak of. But let's talk about what you just said, Namar. I'll take that forward with you as well. You know, the landscape for joint ventures, for the private sector to collaborate. You talked about the Tatas and Lockheed Martin as one example in the defense sector, but there are many others. Do you see that amplifying going forward? And I mean, it's not new to India or the US, but do you believe that that is going to amplify as we move forward now?
Absolutely. As you know, the group is in 7 different sectors, and across every sector, we are seeing huge opportunity. In fact, on defense, we are not into offensive weaponry or anything that could cause harm. It's more mobility.
Yes.
But even there, you would have heard we just signed an MOU with Embraer. We're looking for a medium transport aircraft collaboration. We've got a lot of collaboration going on counter UAVs, which is going to be more civilian infrastructure safety, right, more than anything else. But across other logistics, we are doing the same. Auto, of course. Farm, there is a lot of opportunity because, you know, as Bipul was mentioning, data. India has probably such rich data on the farm and agri side. You can put it to use all over the world. And AI in particular can come in handy big time. So there also we are looking at how, with the data we have, we collaborate with others who who have better capability to use that data and build us the models, etc., which will help us make farming easier the world over, right? So a lot of opportunity for collaboration for sure. I think the challenge remains the geopolitics.
Yes.
And picking the partners that are not going to trip the geopolitical tensions around the world, but it is an area of opportunity for sure.
Since we are talking about geopolitics, John, let me get you to weigh in on, if there is a change in administration in the U.S. Come November, do you believe that that's likely to have any impact on the relationship?
One of the most amazing things is I've never seen the U.S. more divided than we are now. And I used to talk about politics in Europe and politics in Asia, including India, and kind of smile a little bit and say the U.S. has got its act together. We're struggling, to be very candid. However, the one thing the Democrats and Republicans agree on unanimously is India should be our partner. So it will have no effect. Secondly, in Prime Minister Modi, you've watched an unbelievable skill set based on his track record and trust that he'll learn, and he does work very effectively, whichever party we have. And if you go back over the last 4 presidents, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, he got along remarkably well and always created the win-win type of approach. However, I think this uncertainty world that we're in now isn't the exception. I think as you plan for the future, you've got to say this is something that's going to be with us forever. And so we need to, I think, more out of box about how we lead together.
Yes, I think we do need to plan for more uncertainty and volatility. But Vaishali, let me come back to you now. On the US-India Clean Energy Roadmap, there is a lot of work that's already underway. But what are the next steps that you would like to see both sides work on, besides trade that you already spoke of?
Sure. Now, I think on the supply chain side, we have a lot to do. On the manufacturing side, I think we really need to ensure we can leverage what the US can do as a part of even IRA. Like, for example, let me take an example, solar panels. Perhaps they can be manufactured in the US, but in India we can manufacture the rest. But can we leverage, like, can panels be on India's list? Can the other, we get subsidies or the IRA benefits in the US? That's one area. I think green hydrogen is another area where, of course, a lot of sort of incentives are there from the IRA, but we haven't seen the momentum pick up as much, I think, in India. So perhaps a lot more can be done to ensure we work on electrolyzers and other areas which can feed in for the solutions and scale. Capital, I think, is a very important issue. I think my belief is over the last decade or so, capital hasn't been as aggressive as it must to be able to fuel the growth in this sector.
Well, so hopefully Sachin's going to help change that, aren't you?
Data centers, I mean, like data centers, we green data centers, so we can work together for sure. Sachin, but of course we will, of course. And capital, I think we have about $8 trillion of capital to be unlocked. I think we need to be a lot more innovative. And I think we're talking a lot at the high level, but how can we put blended finance to use in India? And these are some of the areas which I feel are quite critical for us to be able to push forward. And I really do believe, Shereen, that even in India we are seeing that, traditional renewables like solar, wind and hydro are only good, they go only so far. But we really have to become more complex and kind of marry things together. We have to do that as far as different geographies are concerned. So, we need to get competitive and yet collaborative.
Competitive and collaborative at the same time. It's a judicious mix and a fine balance. So, the to-do list now on both sides, what the US needs to focus on, what India needs to focus on to ensure that all of the promise that we've spoken about here in terms of opportunity, in fact, is realized.
Yeah, so Shereen, I think, as everybody said, that at this point of time, it's a cusp for the India. We have reached there kind of thing. It's a huge opportunity for us. But at the same time, we have to see some of the aspect. Like just before answering your question, I'll just say we spoke about the green energy and all. The future of the data center. We need to start looking at how, from where we are going to be providing the power, because the kind of consumption which require when you look the huge amount of data, the analyzing job. From where the energy and power is going to be clean power coming to analyze those kind of things. So we have to,
there you go.
Microsoft and various other folks, we're greening data centers. So happy to find solutions.
Yeah, that's right. So we need to start looking on those things. Every organization is looking how they are going to be managing their ESG goal sheet kind of thing. So a lot of those things we need to start seeing that how India and US will start collaborating. While the technology is the one aspect, how we are going to be executing, how we are going to be implementing. I think that this is a great time to collaborating between India and US for technology standpoint, and how we can effectively deploy those things. Like my colleagues spoke about the agriculture, the amount of data which is available in agriculture with 1.4 billion citizens can. The AI can really revolutionize the whole thing, that how the agriculture, the tech, the AI can be used for the human benefit. So these are the some of the area which India and US
I'm going to ask you to give us a prediction in 10 seconds. John said he believes that this is going to be India's decade. You know, one aspect that you believe you're most confident about.
I think I'll go with John. Probably this is the time for us, and not one decade. Probably we already started seeing that movement coming in, kind of thing. So we are on it kind of thing, and we need to just move on.
On the right track, headed in the right direction. We just need to pick up the pace. Bipul, your prediction?
I'm very bullish on the youth of India, particularly from tier 2, tier 3 cities, that they now have seen on social media what's possible. And that dream, that ambition, that sheer drive is going to transform India, and aided by technology, AI, data. These are all means to an end, but the power force is going to be the youth.
Yes, the talent will provide the power force. That's the superpower. Amar, your prediction for the decade?
Very confident as well, like my fellow panelists here. I think 2030, 2047, whatever timeline you put out there and the goals that have been set, I'm very confident we are going to get there. I think more importantly, there will be a lot more companies from India on the world map. And I think that's going to be great for the population of India, because we didn't talk about this, but the employability is a big concern. And you know, that's what is going to create the next industrial powerhouse, is what is going to create the employment opportunities for India.
Sajid?
I think we firmly believe India will become the world's third largest economy, whether it's in 3 years or 10 years. I don't think it matters, and I think ultimately it's going to be underpinned by the quality of talent and the engineering capabilities.
So how much capital do you intend to deploy?
I think it'll be in the double-digit billions over the next decade or so.
Nick?
I think you'll start to see India be the laboratory for more change in specific areas, like you've seen in financial services and energy, where it's the mobile revolution transformed things. So you see in payments so much more, frankly, energy. You see so much more of it just leap forward. You'll see more in different industries because of what Bipul said, the power of youth. Don't underestimate that power to disrupt industries, frankly, for good or not so good. And I think all of us have to be aware of that going in.
No, we do have to be aware of the downsides of the kind of disruption that has been unleashed as well. Mukesh, you know, while there are plenty of opportunities, and we've discussed that on both sides, let's also address what we need to be mindful of in terms of risks, as well as the unfinished agenda on the reform front from both ends.
Well, I think when you look at, one is, this is India's century, not just a decade. That's important because you have a median age of 28, youth which has the energy, the intellect, and the drive to succeed itself. The risk factors are that we have to keep on creating over 1 million jobs a month. If we don't, then you have social uncertainty. The risk factor is that we are in a geopolitical arena where our neighbors would do everything to disrupt the economic momentum of this country. So we have to be conscious of that. I think it's important to understand that we need to leverage US technology, US capital to drive that growth, and we need roughly $100 billion a year FDI coming to this country to generate that 8 to 10% growth itself.
Do you feel confident of being able to get to that $100 billion mark? Because we're still short of that.
No, absolutely. I'm confident.
And do you believe the US is going to drive that?
Absolutely, because you have to understand there's abundance of capital looking for good investment in the US, and India provides that opportunity. I think what we have to do as an organization, USISPF, to build that story, win that confidence, especially of the institutional investors, to come into India. And also government has to play a pivotal role, making sure that there's a level playing field, there's transparency in policy making, and there is a long-term plan, not shifting policies on an annual basis.
So
I think
policy predictability.
is
Is that still a concern?
It's always a concern. And I think it's important to understand that the messaging to the government is, while you're doing a great job driving the agenda, level playing field, transparency and predictability are going to be critical to draw the $100 billion.
Where do you believe the playing field is not leveled today the most?
Well, I think, some places it is there, but when you look at the insurance segment, for example, or look at the IT manufacturing, where they have to go get recertification done, I think that's just duplication of the effort and onerous on these manufacturers itself. I think we have to have the confidence that the certification provided by a friendly country like US will meet the standards of India itself. So I think we need to build that trust.
So non-trade issues continue to be a pain point and causing friction?
Well, I would say they're not causing friction, but they do cause irritation. But that's normal. I think when you have two countries looking at deeper, broader partnership, these are normal things. In families, you will have disagreements, and that moves on.
Yes, irritants, but irritants do need to be addressed because they can often cause pain and slow down momentum. But Vaishali, you wanted to come in,
The point, because we haven't talked about it. You talked about the previous question was about what is the forecast for what's required. And you want to guess what I want to say?
Women.
Exactly. And I want to talk about, because when women rise, the world thrives. We often forget about that. But I want to also talk about a partnership which USISPF and USAID have, which I've been chairing for 4 years, which is SAVI. And we are doing some great work where we are looking at skilling women, not only in India, but in Asia. Not only for the respective regions, but for the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be critical in tapping on this untapped potential we have.
Absolutely.
To skill for the world and get them engaged, because they're the ones who really face the impact of a lot of things we're talking about, climate change,
Without a doubt. I think that's an important point, and I'm glad that you put that on the table. John, the final words to you. Plenty of opportunities, plenty of convergence, especially over the past 2 decades in moving and building this relationship, reaffirming trust, reaffirming the partnership. Some of the irritants continue to be addressed, hopefully, over time. But, big picture, your final comments before we let you go.
I don't think we're dreaming big enough, because every time we've talked about what's possible in your sessions, we ended up overachieving that. And when you set the large dreams, you've got to say, what are your hurdles to get over in order to achieve them? And we've hit a number of them. I think we have to realize that growing the economy 6 to 7% a year doesn't meet the economic engine that we need to create for 1.2 million jobs. It doesn't get the bottom third of society growing at the rate we want. I like what the administration has done the first 100 days in this next year in terms of the approach, but I think we've got to think more out of the box on what's going to be possible. I do believe that India, it is their century, and it's our century together that we're, with the U.S. and India working together, we can drive the U.S. economy by incrementally 1 more percentage point on GDP, and India's by 2. We've got to realize with AI, the majority of companies that exist today will not exist on the Fortune 500 list in their geography 10 years from now. If you don't change, you get left behind. We have to generate, to Mukesh's point, $100 billion, and it will not be easy of FDI inflow. The companies have to acquire more resources both here and in the U.S. in terms of the direction. We have to take the national policies and move them down to all 28, 29 states. And each one of them has to have ownership in terms of the direction. But it is India's decade. You will be the largest economy in the world. We will control how fast it will occur. We've got to dream bigger, but we got to deal with the problems. The neat thing about this administration is when they talk about, they don't want to just hear the good things. We've heard this again and again. Tell us the hurdles, and it's one of the few groups that when you give them the hurdles, whether it's the Prime Minister level, whether it's Jay Shanker's letter, whether it's at any of the people we've talked to, they say, tell us what we have to do more of and where we have to improve. So my takeaway is dream bigger. It's a future of the world that I think India will help drive more. more than any other country in the world.
Well, that's the perfect close. Dream bigger. That's the aspiration for this defining partnership, defining relationship, and lots of areas of collaboration, potential collaboration, existing collaboration and future collaboration as well, to ensure that both sides benefit from this partnership. John and everyone else here on this panel, appreciate you joining us here today at the USISPF Leadership Summit to take us through what the future holds for the US-India relationship. Many thanks for your time and for your insights. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this CNBC-TV18 special from all of us here on the team. For now, goodbye. Many thanks for watching. Do stay tuned. There's a lot more coming right up.